So, as Manchester City close in on the signing of Marc Guehi from Crystal Palace, potentially to be completed over this weekend for at least £35 million, we're reporting in The Independent on Friday afternoon that the City case, the 115 it's sometimes called, even though it relates to 129, 130 charges, could yet go on for at least another year. That comes from sources with knowledge of the process. They're also telling us that outside a small circle, no one has pretty much any idea when the three judges on the independent panel will even come to an outcome. And when it comes, it will only be related to liability, not sanctions if City are found guilty. But if it is an outcome unfavourable to City, there's almost certain to be an appeal. I mean, this is all the more remarkable, of course, because the hearing, so I suppose you'd call it the third stage of this, at this point, 9-year investigation. The hearing concluded in December 2024, and it was expected to be announced in around February 2025. We're now over a year on. No one is any the wiser. I understand there is some frustration at the top of the Premier League about this, but there's not much they can do about it. It also comes, of course, or it's been the subject of increased chatter because of what's happening in the Premier League. I mean, so since December 2024, since the end of that hearing, if you take the 3 transfer windows, City spending, if they conclude this Guehi deal, is going to go to close to £500 million. And this, of course, is, as I was saying, it goes on from it's a 9-year process at this point, going back to November 2018 when Football Leaks, the prompt or the issue that provoked this investigation, when they dropped. It's a remarkable situation. I mean, if you lay it out as well, it essentially means that 21% of all Premier League history, that's 108 months out of 401, have had the uncertainty of this investigation ongoing, given it would have been prompted from those leaks. And if you take it from the start of the 2009-10 season, which is what the charges, from when the charges relate to, well, that means almost half of all Premier League history has had the uncertainty of this weighing over it. It's an incredible situation. I do think it says a lot about regulation in English football, regulation in the Premier League. It's incredible that one of the wealthiest sporting competitions in the world, one of the most valuable, as well as arguably Britain's most successful export, that it can be kind of it can allow such doubt to persist. City, of course, insist on their innocence, but the very scale of this, the length of it, it does provoke bigger questions for the Premier League as to how it's got to this. I mean, one is obviously how it's taking so much longer than the UEFA case. So, I mean, obviously because City are in the Champions League as well, and the initial FFP rules came from UEFA. They were what forced the Premier League to come up with their own rules. It was UEFA who had initially had an investigation based on the same leaks. That concluded, incredibly, on 13th of July 2020, 5.5 years ago now. And that was from a 6-month investigation after the initial leaks, a 1-day hearing, with the initial outcome coming a month later in February 2020, with then some of the judgment being overturned at the Court of Arbitration for Sport in July 2020. Now, while I know people will obviously say that the fact it was overturned, points to why a greater length of time is necessary, that wasn't overturned because of any failure in process. It was overturned because of different interpretations of some of the technicalities. And again, while the Premier League doesn't have a statute of limitations, which did result in some of the different interpretations on technicalities, so they are looking at a longer period. Many people in football would say that all of this was delivered to them on a plate. They're looking at the same information. What's more, after the CAS decision, there were more football leaks that actually produced some of the documents that UEFA had been asking for through their investigation. So no one in football can really understand why it's taking this long. That obviously, I think it raised a bigger question about whether the Premier League had a proper outline of the end process here, what they knew it was going to look like. I mean, it's as long ago as 2021 that Lord Justice Miles criticised the length of time that, quote unquote, a matter of legitimate public concern was taking. And that's 2021. The process obviously took on a new urgency when Alison Britton went in as Premier League chair, and the Premier League was duty bound to investigate the leaks regardless of what any club has thought. That's obviously been a bit of a point of discussion, given that, you know, many people around City, you often see it on social media, feel it came from the pressure of other clubs. That's not the case. The Premier League were duty bound to investigate. I suppose now there are just questions about the process, time scale, what they felt the conclusion would look like, and also crucially whether such latitude should have been given to the three judges as regards timescale. Another big one is, why isn't this case public? This ultimately comes down to founding Premier League rules, where executives didn't necessarily want, quote unquote, dirty washing in public. But as is often the case in regulation, that tends to be how justice gets done, how these cases are resolved. And that's before you even get to the issue that the Premier League now has a completely different geopolitical profile than it did in 1992. So it's led to this absurd situation where the Premier League's own rules stop the process reporting to the people who actually own the league, the clubs themselves. They currently have no information on something integral to their future. I mean, many people point to the strange contrast between a global league with so much money at stake and private arbitration where no one knows anything. Next big question, of course, is if City are found guilty of the most serious charges, what happens next? Well, while an appeal is virtually guaranteed, it will have to be on issues of process, and such grounds are very limited according to the Premier League rule book. Now, of course, any limitations may also be the subject of challenge from City, of course. A more pertinent issue would be the punishment and whether it be suspended pending appeal. The tribunal will similarly have to be asked what the sanctions should be. And that's the thing. I mean, the timing could be crucial there. I mean, if the outcome, if City are found guilty, comes at the end of the season, the delay of a mere month could mean clubs miss out on the title, miss out on the Champions League. So all this stuff is crucial, and clubs do not feel they have clarity on it. By the same token, figures at some clubs now insist they just want to get through the process. But equally, some of them could be entitled to compensation. They haven't yet had any advice on, or feel they haven't had any advice or guidelines on how such claims will be managed, whether, say, if it was a financial claim or financial compensation, that money could be put back onto the pitch according to Premier League financial rules. Then there's almost the biggest of all, which is if City are found guilty under the new rules related to the Independent Football Regulator, and how DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, has spoken about how rogue owners could be pushed out and forced to divest. Would this fall under that? From speaking to people inside DCMS, no one could answer that question, other than they well know it could form a diplomatic incident between the UK and Abu Dhabi. Then, of course, there's the question of what happens if City are not guilty of the most serious charges. So while there'll be a lot of sabre-rattling, the club would be unlikely to see success in any attempt to sue the Premier League. That's due to bodies having the right to bring charges, and also how disciplinary process gives the opportunity for defence. Fears of City suing UEFA around 2020 for loss of earnings also came to nothing. It would still be hard to see how the Premier League leadership could survive such an outcome, given the costs, both in terms of reputation and financial. More critical voices also feel that such an outcome would raise questions over the competition's ability to enforce its own rules, especially with the unique challenges that state-linked ownerships represent. This is even as City would be able to point to a legal outcome as illustration of their innocence. A Premier League appeal does look less likely than a few years ago. That's because many of the figures most animated by this have moved on. And also there is a sense of fatigue at a lot of clubs, especially as regards paying so much in legal fees, which now, I'm told, rise into tens of millions for both sides. And this also involves clubs who weren't in the league in the seasons that the charges relate to. On the other side, some people do think that fatigue is actually a tactic from City. But it does point to some of the back and forth about this, and just more of the uncertainty around the league. Certainly, there are less people around the Premier League that are adamant about having resolved than there were a few years ago, and there is more of a sense of waiting to get through it. But of course, once the outcome comes out, whenever that is, that could of course change feelings depending on what it is. But still, so much uncertainty as City continue to spend. Thanks for joining me on Miguel Delaney's Inside Football. Please like, comment, subscribe, all the rest of it, and see you next time.